Hello, and welcome to Mastermind Mastery, the podcast for professionals who want to create and run successful peer advisory councils, or as we call them, PACs for short, or they're also known as peer groups or business mastermind groups. I'm your host, Tina Corner-Stoltz, founder of Alex Council, where I've been in the industry running groups since 2005 and now help those like you with education, certification, and support wanting to do the same. At one time, I ran 10 groups, nearly 100 members, and sold my groups for a good multiple, and recently released my second book, Your Seat at the Table, How to Create and Run Your Own Peer Advisory Councils, published by Forbes, and grateful to you that it's an Amazon bestseller. I invite you to join each week where we share strategies and techniques to successfully launch and become a master of running your PACs. You'll hear insights, perspectives, do's and don'ts, learn from my and my guests' mistakes, successes, and get the inside track to key takeaways. Each time we have a guest, we'll be having a bit of fun. So are you ready? Let's get going and dive into today's episode.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Mastermind Mastery. I'm Tina Corner-Stoltz, your host, and today we have a wonderful guest, Adam Coffey. And Adam, actually, I reached out to him from finding him on LinkedIn. And it was because I was impressed with this type of peer group that he is doing, a chairman's group. And I believe for everyone out there today, you're going to really hear about some kind of tactics, but also just open your mind into a whole nother level of a group that is existing out there today. And maybe what you're going to do is walk away with some ideas about how you can up your game with the members that are currently in your group. So welcome, Adam, to the show today.
Tina, it's good to be here. Hello to all your listeners out there. I'm all cozy in my home office here. I'm ready to go. Let's do this.
You are. I love the fireplace. I miss that.
It warms my backside all winter long when it's cold here in Dallas. Yeah.
Yes. I just need a fake one here in St. Petersburg. So Adam has an amazing background, and I will not do justice, but you will hear that come out in our conversation today. I am positive about. But his amazing background is how he has built companies multiple times into the $1 billion category, right, Adam?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And how he has taken that knowledge and how it's going to particularly has enabled him to create this chairman's board group. So our key takeaways today that I am expecting you all to get out of this is, first of all, again, opening your mind up to another type of group and hearing actually what Adam does with his group and how it succeeds, and just gives you some ideas on how maybe you can add value to the groups that you're doing, or as you're thinking about being in the mastermind peer group world, the type of group that's right for you. So Adam, as we get started, what would be helpful is kind of how did you come up with the concept of starting this group, and how long ago was that?
Yeah. So listen, I a lot of things about my background. I was a Fortune 500 executive at GE during the Jack Welch era. That led me to call it, a 21-year career as a CEO, building 3 national companies for 9 different private equity sponsors. And I was a buy and build guy. I bought 58 companies. I combined them, multiple hold periods, multiple exits, billions of dollars in successful exits. And I got bored. I got bored being a CEO, impacting one company at a time. I wanted to, I've been very successful, financially, et cetera. And it's like, I wanted to give back. I wanted to be able to impact multiple companies at a time. And so I had been teaching for 15 years at UCLA in the executive MBA program, working with a couple professors there who, I wasn't teaching classes. I was a CEO, but I was a guest visitor, guest speaker, and I was loving speaking to cohorts of executive MBA students. Every new cohort comes in, it's going to wind up, I'm in front of them, and it was a global audience. About 50% of each cohort was international. And so I was loving the teaching aspect, was really tired of being the CEO thing. And I'm like, how can I change my paradigm around? And so I hung up my CEO cleats 2 years ago, and I started a consulting business. I still work with private equity, and I sit on boards and coach their CEOs. And I work with founders who are scaling and transitioning. And I teach. I still write books. I've got 3 #1 bestsellers. I'm conducting seminars globally for a global audience. And I've been on like 150 podcasts. And so when I meet people, I ask them, how did you hear about me? I heard you on a podcast. I read one of your books. You taught, me. I was in one of the cohorts, that you taught at UCLA or someplace else. I also did Pepperdine and Oxford. So there were different places where I've spoke and have appeared. And so, as I transitioned out, I started working, doing my thing, and it kind of morphed. And so I got to give credit to a guy out there named JT Fox. JT Fox and I are partners. He calls himself the world's, he's a very successful guy, 9-figure entrepreneur. And he I call him he's like the promoter, and we started doing seminars together. And so when we started doing seminars, a logical, call it permeation, I get hundreds of people. The first stage I spoke on, we had over 1,000 people from literally, 77 countries. And, it was magical the first time he and I were together on stage. And so it was his brain trust to create the chairman group. And so what we did is we created a high-end exclusive, call it coaching program, for ultra wealthy, ultra successful business entrepreneurs. And so the chairman group today has Fortune 500 senior executives. It has entrepreneurs and business owners, some with, revenues, upwards of 400 million, in size. And so we created this exclusive, group for very successful entrepreneurs, high-end people. And when they attend my events, if they come see the seminars, they get priority seating. They get let in first. Their seats are up front. We work together monthly via Zoom. We do one-on-one coaching, and then we do group events a couple weekends a year here in Dallas. They all come in, see me here in Dallas, and I try to make that experience special for each of them.
And so when you think about the format, let me kind of go all the way back for a second.
Sure.
And that is when you're putting, these what you call the high net worth, very successful executives together, what kind of criteria, though, are you using to be sure that they all feel like they're peers in the room, right? Because that's kind of an important criteria.
Matter of fact, when I talk to a lot of people, and they're open to coaching, they're open to being a part of a mastermind or a peer group. One of the issues that a lot of them talk to me about is, hey, I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. When I'm in my typical peer group, the problem I have is I'm the one doing the talking and the teaching, in the group, and I'm not learning. And so I know I'm in the wrong room. And so they're looking for a higher end experience, one where they're matched kind of from a global, and this is a global peer group. I've got people from all over the world, in multiple continents. And so they all are like, these are very successful people, and they want to be in a room filled with other very successful people, and they want to truly learn. They're not there to be flashy and flamboyant and show off what they've accomplished. They're there to learn. That's why they're here. And so, I kind of do have them segregated into cohorts. I've got a real estate, call it investment cohort. I have, a professional services cohort, kind of a more blue collar services type cohort. So I try to think of, we do some group events where we're all together.
Sure.
And when we're doing that, I try to focus, the content around things that are helpful and beneficial to all. But aside from beneficial for all, I do one-on-one coaching then with each of the members of the peer group. So they get that one-on-one specialty kind of attention, in addition to the group content. And so we have this regular rhythm. We do weekly Zooms. We do, twice a year, we're in person for a weekend. And then they have a certain block of hours that they can use for one-on-one coaching with me. And in this particular case, JT also participates, and so he's an expert in branding and social media presence and things like that. He and I do a TikTok video, and 1 million people watch it. Adam Coffey does a TikTok video and 5 people watch it. I mean, it's not my bag. It's not my thing. And so he's really great at branding and social media presence and how to use social media. I'm the business guy, so I'm the expert in scaling and M&A, and we try to feed off of each other. And so he also participates in that group with me. And so that's how we do it, though. We think about what are their areas of expertise. Let's kind of segregate them. Let's make sure that they've got their own little peer group working. And then let's make sure that content that we do as a group addresses all. And then the one-on-one coaching with me addresses the specific. So there's multiple layers of engagement. And then, like I said, they come to seminars, they get front row seating. If I'm doing a seminar, then I'll do a private lunch with just members of the chairman group. And so we give them the exclusive feeling and experience, one-on-one content plus group content. And it's kind of all packaged together in layers. And that's how we make sure that there's the specialization that's unique to them, but then the content that's good for a group or a subgroup. And, it's a balancing act. And to be honest, I mean, I'm still learning on what works, what doesn't. My first event, I brought in one of the world's, renowned experts on executive presence and leadership, and happens to be a professor I've known for years and worked with for years. And, we brought him in, and 7 million people have taken his, executive presence courses online. And so it's like, hey, it's like, I noticed that there's this, as I'm doing my one-on-one coaching, I'm noticing there's this common thread, and I want to address that in one of our group sessions. And let's bring in the world's renowned expert on that and talk about this for the benefit of the group. And so it's not just me. I'll also bring in additional resources too.
Mm-hmm. And I want to clarify something probably for our audience, is that how often are they coming together in their cohort?
So that's a good question. So we're together formally monthly, as an entire group. I'm doing the one-on-one coaching, call it 6 sessions a year. And so we're kind of timing those so that they've got some time to move the ball down the field, and then we're in person. I encourage and connect the subgroups. I couldn't tell you if they're meeting daily, weekly, monthly, or whenever they have an issue, they're calling up. Think of it like and in some respects, what YPO is really good about, when they put the cohort together, these people are then interacting. There's some YPO led content. There's some one-to-one content. And I would say that this is going on in my group as well. They're just all very high-end people with large businesses or high levels of success. And so I know they're tapping into each other kind of broadly, ad hoc as they see fit. I'm not tracking that interaction.
Right. Well, and, you mentioned something a minute ago, which is when we were talking about they have to feel like they're with their peers. You and I have talked about this, but I would like the audience to hear this point of, why do they join your group? Versus
it's a great question.
Something else.
Yeah, because my group is not cheap. Matter of fact, I would say, I went from 0 to 7 figures, in this group, very quickly. And so it's not 7 figures what they pay in totality as a group. And so it's a high end group, much more expensive than your typical Vistage type share group or even YPO.
All right, I'm going to pause you for a second. Do you mind sharing for the audience? So they're probably in their head calculating right now, okay, about, I wonder how much he really charges.
Well, you're talking 40 members of the group, anywhere from 15 to 50,000. And so, call it on average, 40 people, 25,000 each. It's $1 million, call it annual peer group. And, and there's the 3 cohorts, and we do stuff group, individual. So they get the one-on-one coaching from me. And, don't mind saying I'm an expensive coach. I get that. I understand that my time's valuable, and I genuinely care about people and want to help people. I get compensated for my time because now that I'm no longer CEO, that's how I earn a living. And so I'm not ashamed, of that. And, my hourly coaching rates have more than doubled, in the 2 years that I've been doing this. And so, I would also tell you for all your people out there listening, when I started this, I had 100% capacity, and I had a goal from an income perspective, and as I am filling capacity, I'm, raising rates, and when capacity isn't dropping off, I'm raising rates. And, it's like it's finding that sweet spot or that balance where people are willing. And I think, again, it goes back to, hey, listen, if I'm a successful entrepreneur and I've got a business with more than 100 million in revenue, where's my peer group? Where's the wheelhouse that's going to really challenge me, as an individual, and where am I going to get something? And I think one thing that's great for all your listeners is that, broadly speaking, everybody in today's world is accepting of coaching and mentoring and peer groups, and they recognize the value that can come from learning from others, whether it's the coach. But a lot of my clients have said, Adam, I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I'm in the wrong room. It's like, and so there are some people who teach from a theoretical perspective. And so they rely on their academic credentials. And I've written papers and books. And then there's guys like me I'm a practitioner. I had $2.5 billion in exits before I ever coached anybody. And I had been writing, books and continue to write my books, but, some people like to experience, and learn from people who have walked in their shoes and have been on the road that they seek to travel. And
yes.
I've done that in multiple industries. And so I have a credibility, I think, as a senior executive and as a guy who's built billion-dollar businesses and monetized them, that they appreciate and they resonate. That's not true for everybody, and some people are like, hey, I'm looking for the discount. Some people can't afford, call it, so sometimes it's price that drives us. Sometimes it's the learning experience. Hey, I'm a PhD. I'm an academician. I want to learn from other academians. And so some people value different methodologies. Some people learn better in different, call it, settings. And so I find that my clients want a personal touch from a senior executive who has exceeded their own personal goals and objectives. And they feel that they can climb a mountain with me and get someplace new that an alternate peer group might not allow them to achieve. They would get a forum, to say, I've done this, but they aren't learning. And so I think that's why I resonate with the people that I do resonate with.
2 points here. One is I always talk about with those that are wanting to get into this space is that the actual member first joins because of them, right?
Yeah.
The moderator running the group. And that is what I'm hearing from you, because you're bringing to the table and you have to have that same kind of level experience that they do. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to relate and also talk, right, at that level, and also attract their peers to the group. So that's one. And then second is I also hear is that not everybody actually pays exactly the same thing, right? And that's okay, because one of the things that we teach is that you always have to work at your market pricing, right? And what is it that you can command, especially as you get better and better and better, and your chairman's group gets better and better and better, and there's more value being driven, right?
And so let me just talk on that for a second. So the reason I vary my rates really has to do with the amount of one-on-one coaching a person receives. And so if a person wants to be a member of the chairman group, they can at a lower price point. They get less one-on-one coaching. As my price levels go up, and so my lowest group gets less coaching, and they attend one of the annual events as opposed to two. The higher price points, people get a larger block of one-on-one coaching time, and then they get this, the second event. And so I think it's okay to tier our products and services, as a, call it a mastermind coach, as a peer group coach. It's okay to have different levels, and keep in mind that not everybody fits into, one mold. We have different types of people, and I want to build a welcoming and a place that's attractive at multiple price points. It also allows room for growth. So if a person comes into me and they start at a lower end, as they're finding success and growth in their own business, or they're just testing, they're putting their toe in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're deciding, okay, I like this. I want more. They now then have the more, and the more comes. And we continuously are adding to the chairman group. As an example, so I just did this group of seminars in September. It was the first time, the chairman group, was invited to be allowed into the room first, to pick their seats first, to have reserved seating where the rest of the people were general admission. We did a lunch for them, where we were together with them during the seminar. And so, it's priority this, priority that. And so it continues to morph, it continues to grow. I continue to learn. And so those tiers, I think, are important. We shouldn't force everybody into one price point. We should tier our offering to attract a wider group, because some people want to try it, like it, buy it, or they, as they're growing, then it's like, okay, I need more of this because it's working for me. And so I now have a different appreciation of the value that's there.
Yes. Right. And it also creates a little bit of, I want to aspire to be, right, in the elite level of whatever the offer is. Yeah.
And so, like, as another example, as I was working on my latest book, Empire Builder, the chairman group were the first to read Empire Builder, and I had them read it before it was pre-released, and I wanted their input, and they were then the first people to be able to leave reviews for me on Amazon when it came out, and so it's like, little exclusives, always nice, always helpful. But I do my best to try to add value. I told you this off camera. It's like my goal and objective. If someone is going to pay me money, I take that very seriously. I don't mind taking millions of dollars from a PE group and institutional shareholders. I'll do that all day long.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
But when you as an individual are trusting me and writing a check or giving me a credit card, for hard-earned money in your, what I'll call, small to medium-sized business, I feel this level of responsibility to need to really add value. So my personal goal and objective is, at a minimum, if someone is paying me money to be in my peer group, then I want to make sure that they're getting at least 10 times the value of what they're paying within the year, and can tangibly point to it and say, because of working with Adam in the peer group, I've made these adjustments to my business. It's led to this much growth or this much increased profitability. My ultimate goal, though, is 100 times. I'd like someone who works for me, if they make an investment, if they're going to invest the kind of money that I'm charging them, 10 times, that's a good return on investment that keeps you there. 100 times, that's a home run. That's a really good reason to be in the room. And if I can't earn your trust, or if I can't hit those goals and objectives, then I don't deserve to have anybody renew and, and or stay with me for a second year. And so personally, I think as coaches, we each need to think about what our offering is in terms of a monetary gain for our clients. If I'm charging 10 grand a year, I better be giving them $100,000 worth of value, up to $1 million worth of value, and it's like, if I can't deliver at least that, on the low end, if I'm charging 10 grand, if I can't help them with 100 grand of improvement to their lives or their business, you don't deserve a renewal, And so I like to challenge coaches to think about, it's not just about what can I teach or how do I occupy time. It's how can my client translate what they're learning here to revenue, to earnings, that improves their lives. And if results, has to be results driven.
It's interesting in that the other day I was sitting in somebody's peer group meeting, and an aha moment kind of came to me, and it is about the impact that, you're talking about the impact that you're making that is tangible, and you can wrap your head around it factually with a result, right? And so it's quantitative. It's not fluffy about this is what I think. And
that's because I come from that world. I'm a former, Fortune 500 executive and a CEO. It's like everything's quantitative, and
or you're not there,
right?
Right? Yeah. And so I encourage the audience right now to take this and think about. I call them impact testimonials. instead of just a regular testimonial about how people love to work with you and blah, 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 what is the impact that you have made by them being involved in your group on their lives, on their business, tangibly? And there's so many times that this is a direct, but then also an indirect impact as well, even personally and professionally, right? So, personally, it could impact their families, their leadership, et cetera. But encourage everybody to measure the impact, right?
And if you can do that, if you can really demonstrate that kind of value, I'm thinking you were talking about that. I was thinking of a person I'm coaching right now, and when I started working with them 18 months ago, they had less than $2 million in earnings, and 18 months later now we're over 10 million in earnings, on our way to 12 to 15 million of earnings in 24. Now hiring an investment banker, that company will sell for 150 to 175 million, in the first half of next year. And I think about the tangible value of, well, at 2 million, that company was worth X. 18 months later with me, they're about ready to monetize it. This is a founder-led business, about ready to monetize it for like 150 to 175 million. Hey, that's tangible. Now what do you think about that money you paid me? Sounds like a bargain, in my world. I helped that person build an M&A team. I helped that person, do M&A, buy and build. I've helped that person hire, the people, help that person, hire the banker. It's like, as I develop these relationships, it's like success stories like that. Those are quantifiable. That's X to Y, 2 million in earnings to 12 million in earnings times a multiple about to be realized and cash in the bank.
Taking it to the bank.
Yeah. And now I think about that success, and this person's also become a friend, right? So a lot of my clients become friends. It's
of course.
I don't really have friends outside of my work life. They're work friends. We have family. It's like my wife and I we were talking about this the other night. We spend all our time with family. Friends require maintenance, and we have to engage and, be a part of the world. And so most of my friendships come out of people that I'm working with, and we're like-minded, and we're working together to build something, and we develop a bond and a friendship. But boy, you need to be able to quantify the success that they are having. And not everybody will be able to quantify their own success. I have other clients that, frankly, I almost think they're just really wealthy people who just need a friend and want to be, and so I also call myself a business shrink, in some regards, because there's that people element. And, so some people I help in different ways. It's the camaraderie of being around other successful people. It's what I learn about my business, or it's just, hey, I just like to be around other people.
And speaking of learning, as we kind of get to a close, I have two questions. So one, learning. When you think about your journey of starting your chairman's group, et cetera, when you reflect back, what's been your biggest learning?
So it's interesting because the chairman group was not even on my radar screen when I started my consulting business. I was going to do a bunch of consulting with PE, and I discovered a bottleneck with private equity. I can only be in so many cities at a time, 3 weeks after a quarter close when everybody wants to hold a board meeting. So I limited the number of boards I do. I don't limit the amount of coaching I did. That got me to start, working with founders. Founders don't have formal boards that meet 3 weeks after a quarter close. It's like it opened up a whole new revenue. So my idea was private equity, my wheelhouse. I'm going to work with private equity firms. The bottleneck created the shift and the ancillary revenue stream, which became me coaching and working with entrepreneurs. That, kind of created the shift to the chairman group. So I can honestly tell you, when I started this business 2 years ago, the chairman group wasn't even on my radar screen. It was not something that I even contemplated. And so I think, if I think about my own personal, learnings, it's to not be so rigid in my thinking that I can only be X. It's be open and receptive, and I guess be tuned in to what the market's telling you and what the opportunities are, and allow yourself to morph. And I told people, most enlightening thing for me, when I was a CEO, I had to look at the world through a very narrow lens, which is my company, my shareholders, my investors. And I have to ignore all the opportunities that are out there in the world. Well, when I stopped being a CEO, the world became a much bigger, broader place. And what I thought I knew about building my business is now about 1/3 of my revenue. And 2/3 was created because I took the
Blinders off.
And now, I used to tell people I thought my largest paydays were behind me because I was a CEO building big companies and selling them. And I'm actually realizing now that my biggest paydays are still in front of me because I'm now free to collaborate with multiple companies and entrepreneurs and businesses in ways I was not able to before. So you as a coach, as a mentor, as a peer group leader, absolutely need to stop looking at life through this narrow focused lens and start thinking broader, bigger. Because, I think if my experience is any guide for you, it's that I'm creating 2/3 of my revenue for my coach or for my consulting business in areas I never contemplated 2 years ago. And so I don't see why you can't either, think about how can I broaden my reach, my touch, what I'm offering, and be open, be creative. That's what I've learned the most, is not be rigid in my thinking.
Very critical in this world and how it changes and what everybody's needs are, because those are changing. And if you're not evolving to match your members' needs, it's going to be a problem, which you may have sort of touched on this a little bit, because my last question is, what piece of advice would you give the audience who either they're thinking about running groups or they're already running them? And so through your experience, it could be anything in regards to advice, but what comes to mind that you would love to share?
So people ask me if I could have lived my life over again, what's the one thing I would have changed professionally? And I'd always tell them, I wish I would have left the CEO seat 10 years earlier. So if you're working for somebody else, you're missing the boat on wealth creation. So those of you who are thinking about doing something, I would tell you, stop thinking, start doing. For one, we never get wealthy collecting a paycheck from somebody else. And if wealth is what we're seeking, I'm making more than I ever made as a CEO. I'm at home every day, and I'm going out for
with
walks.
With
a fireplace, and I'm going out for walks, and I'm really, really enjoying life. And so it's not a chore, and I actually work more hours than I used to as a CEO when it was a grind and stressful. So I would tell you, be a doer, not a dreamer. That's one. If you're running something today already and you're a coach, then I would tell you, going back to my Fortune 500 roots, how are you challenging yourself? How are you holding yourself accountable? Because the biggest problem I see with entrepreneurs, when I'm a CEO and I have a board of directors, if I don't bring it and if I don't hit my numbers, I get fired. I get whacked. Who's going to fire you? Nobody. And so I see too many entrepreneurs that don't hold themselves accountable. They don't plan. They don't stretch or push themselves. And no one is holding them accountable. And so they get into some kind of a rut and they get very comfortable with where they're at. I remember doing a LinkedIn post last year on January 1st. I'm sure I'll do another one this year on January 1st. I did it at 4 a.m. And while the rest of the world was sleeping, I was laying out
just going to bed.
Yeah. And I went to bed before midnight, actually, because I'm a boring, 59-year-old guy and don't care anymore. If the world doesn't blow up when New York, gets to midnight, then I'm good,
We're good.
I can check out. Right. So, but I started the year with, what are my goals and objectives? And I'm only flashing here for a second, but there's a whiteboard in my office. And on January 1st at 4 a.m., I am articulating what my goals and objectives are, what my objective measurements are going to be. And then I started breaking it down into my first quarter plan, my second quarter plan. I had achieved in most of my initiatives my annual plan before the end of the first half, and it's like, I focus me every morning. I look up, it's staring me in the face. It doesn't go away, and so it's, what am I going to accomplish? How am I going to accomplish it? How am I going to measure it? How am I going to hold myself accountable? And if you want something in life, then you need to press yourself and work towards it, because the difference between success and failure is, in my mind, it's effort. It's the effort we put into it. And a lot of successful entrepreneurs have been knocked down, or they've failed, or had failures. I learn more from failures than I do from wins. And if all I did was win, I would never know that there was more for me to accomplish. It's like, it's good to get knocked down once in a while, But that's the biggest problem entrepreneurs have. We don't hold ourselves accountable. And as a result, mediocrity becomes okay and acceptable.
Comfort. So absolutely. Well, Adam, what a great conversation.
Well, thank you. A fireside chat.
Yes. Especially at this time of year, it's perfect.
Yes.
How can our audience get in touch with you, find your books, etc.?
Sure. So, I'm on LinkedIn every day, Adam Coffey, Coffey, and I respond to people on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me there. AdamCoffey.com is a website for my seminars, the chairman group. AdamECoffey.com is my personal website for individual coaching clients that I do outside of the group events. And my books are anywhere fine books are sold. Just, go to Amazon, type in my name, and poop, they'll pop up and they're there. And again, I donate the royalties to charity. They're available in every format you can imagine: audiobooks, Kindle, and paperback, hardcover. So I encourage your listeners to engage. Let's start a peer group for peer groups.
Yes.
That would be fun. Let's start a chairman group for mastermind leaders. And
that's exactly right. You watch out. I'll be calling you. Yes. And of course, in the show notes, we'll have Adam's LinkedIn profile, so you can also connect it from there. And again, Adam, thank you for your time today and sharing your insights. I know the audience.
Thank you for having me, and happy holidays to you and all your listeners.
The same. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for another episode of Mastermind Mastery. And until the next episode next week on Tuesdays, have a great, productive week.
Hey, moderators of groups, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. To get access to today's show notes and exclusive content and resources, visit tinacornerstoltz.com/podcast or lxcouncil.com, where you can also become part of an exclusive online community, attend our academy, or get free resources, templates, checklists, and more. And you can even contact me there as well. So if this episode resonated with you and you know someone who can also benefit from listening, please share with them by taking a screenshot and even posting on your social media. I also love reviews and appreciate hearing from each of you, those actually doing this wonderful work. Please tune in next week for another episode of Mastermind Mastery. And I'll close by sharing something my mentor did after every learning moment. He shared a shiny pebble from his pocket with anyone he passed knowledge to, and asked them to forward that pebble knowledge on. So now, I encourage you to go pass on a pebble, the takeaways you learned today, to either your existing groups or fellow peers. Now, go make it a great one.